Okay, I'm going to do my usual. I mean, maybe some of you have been to some of my meetings before, some of you haven't. So usually what I do is just talk for a little while about non-duality, and then we just see where it goes from there with questions and answers and discussion. So, non-duality. So many different places I could start. I will start with there is no person. It's kind of the heart of it, the heart of what we're talking about, the heart of, if there is such a thing as a non-dual realization, and you know that in itself is a somewhat awkward and dodgy phrase, but nevertheless, let's assume there is something called non-dual realization. The heart of that is I'm going to use the phrase direct seeing, because realization sounds a bit like it's conceptual, and there's nothing conceptual about this. It's the direct seeing that there is no self, that the person that we believe ourselves to be is a kind of illusion. I'm using that word a bit carefully, and if you want to, you can come back to that later. Let's just leave it at that for now, that it's a kind of illusion. So when non-duality is seen suddenly, as it quite often is, it's often described by people as a real shock. I mean, it can be breathtaking, it can be shocking, it can be a tremendous surprise. And I think at the heart of that surprise is what I'm talking about here. The surprise is the sudden seeing, and it could just be literally for a split second, the sudden seeing that this kind of solid being here that all my life I have assumed is an independent, separate person simply does not exist. I mean, that's about the most shocking realization, excuse me, that there can be. So sometimes you hear people, I use this phrase myself, you hear people describing awakening as the sudden recognition, the sudden disappearance of the person, and the recognition that this is really just a kind of an emptiness, that there isn't really anything here. And this has got nothing to do with any description that you or I might have come across in spiritual books or in listening to spiritual speakers. I mean, I have a long, long history of being a spiritual seeker. And there's lots of descriptions, and there were lots of experiences here, and I know there'll have been experiences out there and experiences with many, many people of a kind of what I call a sort of a transpersonal experience of something much bigger than myself, the kind of maybe a sort of a spiritual awareness of a connection with everything, or maybe a connection with everyone. And that is really not what I'm talking about here, because in all of those experiences, the kind of experiences I'm talking about, however wonderful they might have seemed, and some of them did seem pretty wonderful, there was always somebody here having the experience. There was always somebody, no matter, you know, perhaps a bit faded, perhaps very translucent, but there was always somebody here. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is the possibility of the direct seeing that actually there's no one here at all, neither personal nor transpersonal, neither solid nor translucent. There is simply no one here. I'm talking about the possibility of that realization simply arising. And the reason that I've added that last phrase, simply arising, is because this is a realization over which this, what I believe myself to be, has no control. It's not something that, you know, I can do anything about in a way. I mean, I can meditate, I can do all sorts of things, for example, which might bring about transpersonal experiences, spiritual experiences, but that is not what's being talked about here. What's being talked about here is the realization that there is no one who has any experience. Experiences happen, spiritual experiences happen, ordinary experiences happen, experiences of taking sips of water happen. What this is about is the possibility of seeing that there is no one who has any of those experiences. In other words, there is no one at the center here. I'm just thinking about some of the websites about this, some of the other speakers who talk about this, and some of the website names. And I think one of them is, I think it's Jeff's actually, is Life Without a Center. I mean, that expresses it really well. It's like the center that everything happens to disappears. So in ordinary experience, which in this framework is called duality, in ordinary experience, there are always, if you like, two things going on. There's experience out there, experience of the world, and there's the experiencer in here. I mean, that's why it's called duality, because there's two things. You know, there's me, who moves around in what seems to be an external world and experiences everything. And there's the external world that I have to move around in and negotiate. That's duality. So what we're talking about here is the possibility of that way of seeing the world simply collapsing, and the recognition that actually there's no external world, there's no internal world, there's no person moving around inside an external world and interacting with it and interacting with other people. There is just seamless oneness. And I've got a feeling that perhaps that might be long enough for an introductory chat tonight. So at the moment, I'll leave it at that. If anything else occurs to me, I'll throw it in. But for now, I'll just take a pause and see if anybody wants to come in with points, questions, discussion. Let's just see what happens. I will. Yeah.
Do we ask questions to the chat?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You just go ahead. I kind of making the assumption that if you suddenly appear big on my screen, you've been brought in to say something. So yeah, you just go ahead. Yeah.
Is this something that can't be categorized? Is that what we're saying? Because there's no contrast or boundary between something and something else. Is that what we're saying about there not being a, I don't know, like a black and a white with the internal external? There's no, they blend into one and kind of paradoxically are nothing.
Well, you certainly could say that this kind of makes all categories break down, and it challenges all categories. I mean, categories can kind of mean mental categories, and certainly, you know, our kind of mental concepts of things tend to collapse and get very much reorganized. But are you trying to get at something else there?
I'll park my brain for a second. I think someone else probably wants to ask a question.
Okay. Parking the brain is probably quite a good idea where this is concerned. Somebody else coming in? I can see some hands raised.
Oh, hi, Richard. Yeah, I'm just trying to organise. There's a question actually just through chat. Is non-duality a concept, belief, or idea?
Right. Okay. Well, I would say that non-duality is all of those things, and on that level, it has no value whatsoever. So There are many concepts around non-duality, many ideas, and I don't know if the third one was theory, but if it was, we'll throw that one in as well. Of course, anything that can be talked about, we can refer to as concepts, ideas, theories, etc. But on that level, it has no value, except I suppose I could throw in as an entertainment. Some of us, for no reason whatsoever, become fascinated with non-duality, and we find ourselves drawn to places where concepts, ideas and theories about it, are discussed. And some of us love exchanging with other apparent people on that level about it. But really what we're talking about here has nothing to do with that. What we're talking about here, I'm going to use this phrase again, it's a direct seeing. I could use the word experience, but there's a reason probably several reasons I'm avoiding using that word, because I think it's misleading, and maybe we could go into that later or maybe not. But what I'm talking about here is the direct seeing, the direct, if you like, realization that what seems so solidly at the heart of my experience doesn't even exist, isn't even there at all. So yes, we deal in concepts, we theorize about this. Some of us love to talk about this almost endlessly, but in a way that's not, in a way words aren't relevant at all. I mean, in a way we could just sit here and say nothing, but it wouldn't be very entertaining. This is something that I'm going to throw this phrase in now. I'm sure a lot of you would have come across it before. It's Ramana Maharshi's phrase, "Your head is in the tiger's mouth." He uses that for it's something like some kind of energy seizes us, or seizes some of us, that kind of drags us to this topic. And there's no way of knowing why that is. There's no way of rationalizing that. It's just a kind of somewhere between an enthusiasm and an addiction for this seizes some of us, and we just kind of rush towards it, and we want to communicate about it. And there's a paradox in that, because what this really is can never be got through communication. Yeah.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, hi.
Hi there. I recently followed some YouTube videos from Tony Parsons again, and he is kind of, I don't know the right English word, relentless in telling, communicating about this. And he keeps on saying that we believe that we are a person of free will and choice, and that's not how it is. But I find it really hard in let's say real life to once you get to know that you're just following what's happening, instead of being the owner of the ideas, or the one that makes the choices, or the one that's able to, let's say, succeed in a society. I find it hard to communicate with others about this, because some people can be so convinced the other way around. So that's part of my struggle as well, how to deal with that. And the other thing is that what you said about that the person is falling away.
I'll tell you what, should we deal with one thing at a time?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
You raised a huge thing there about communicating.
Yeah. Okay.
If you hold on to that idea, and let's talk about that. I mean, certainly one of the most challenging things about this, when people come across it, is this thing that it blows apart free will and choice, any concept. of that, and that's, you know, very challenging until it's seen. There's you know, many other ways in which you can come across those ideas that there's no free will and choice, which can also be shocking and which people resist. What you're talking about is the difficulty of communicating about, well, about that aspect of this with other people. And I think the main thing to say about that is that what you're having there is a very common experience. It's extremely difficult to communicate about this to anyone who doesn't have some kind of resonance with it. So that's the other side of what I was saying before. I was saying, like, some people are just seized with an enthusiasm for this. That's, you know, Ramana Maharshi's "your head is in the tiger's mouth," and it's irresistible. And it's like we can become addicted to wanting to communicate about this. But for everybody else, it's kind of nonsense. It's so challenging. It's so challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the fastest ways, probably, I don't know where you are, but certainly one of the fastest ways in this country to start a fight is to probably walk into a pub and say to somebody, you haven't got any free will. That's almost worse than you don't exist as a person, because they won't even understand that. But you haven't got free will. It's such a challenge to almost everything that we are brought up to believe about ourselves.
Yeah, and
It's the heart of all our values and all our religions and all our philosophies, that we have free will, and we don't.
Yeah, and meanwhile, life is just proving the other way around all the time.
Can you say that again?
Life is just proving that's the other way around all the time, because you can be successful at one moment and be a complete failure the other one. And well, when you're a success, you blame it on yourself, and when you're a failure, you blame it on the others. That's mostly how things go. But once you see that things just happen and you're just part of the happening, that makes life different in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. It overturns, it upends everything. It overturns everything. But there's a huge resistance to, there's a huge resistance. I mean, if it's seen, it's seen, and there's nothing that can be, you know, you can't get away from that. But in terms of communicating about this to people, it's just, there's so much resistance to that.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes the person just kicks in again and he's telling, well, you've been very successful and done the right thing or whatever, but there's a knowing in the background that's all just rubbish, and you know, life's just going on, and be happy when you're happy and be sad when you're sad, and experience what's to be experienced in a way.
Yeah, there's a knowing in the background is a very good phrase.
Yeah,
you know, because this doesn't wipe everything out, you know, unless physical death occurs at the same time as non-dual seeing. It doesn't wipe everything out. There's still a person in a way, you know, there's still an individual or a character who probably has to go on earning a living and has relationships and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but that can be seen as well then.
But there's this knowing in the background, the person's been seen through, yeah.
So these persons still can have a lot of fun together and have a nice life and enjoy what's ever coming up. Yeah.
Sometimes when people kind of hear this and they process it theoretically and intellectually, I mean, I've had this said to me as a challenge, you know, that it all sounds so depressing and miserable. But no, absolutely not. It's freeing. It really is freeing, because I mean, in a way, we live in a world, in a society where, you know, the preciousness of the individual with their free will to make of life what they will is regarded as almost a holy object. You know, it's so precious. Actually, in a way, it's a tremendous burden. So when that's seen through, it's like, you know, that we are, using language a little bit carelessly here, but nevertheless, we are released from that burden, the burden of being the burden of all these concepts of being a free individual with responsibility and choices and so forth. Yeah.
You carry that around, don't you then? Yeah.
Carry that burden around. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it doesn't mean that there isn't fun still arising and interactions still arising and enjoyment still arising.
Yeah. Okay, somebody else maybe?
Okay.
Okay, I have one question. Hello, Richard.
Hello, hi.
Okay, we can observe all our thoughts and emotions. Would you recommend to watch the watcher himself in order to remove the layers of the false identity?
Well, I feel like saying only if you want to give yourself a headache, not otherwise. I mean, to be honest, I mean, watching the watcher himself doesn't really make much sense to me. It's sort of sounding warning bells in my head, a little bit like people who talk about, consciousness becoming conscious of itself, or awareness becoming awareness of itself. And I think I really have a great deal of difficulty believing that anybody knows what that means. I mean, I know people use these phrases, and some people might be able to talk about such phrases, for half an hour or so. I still find it difficult to believe anybody knows what those phrases mean. Watching the watcher sounds to me, in the area of certain, fairly well-known sort of spiritual, in inverted commas, techniques, like, for example, the idea of developing witness consciousness. That's a phrase that's sometimes used. In terms of what we're talking about here, I would say we could give a really simple argument that is all simply irrelevant. What you think you are doing is irrelevant because you are not doing it. And what it is that you and I might think that we are trying to find, we can do nothing about finding it. In a way, we could say that it finds us. We do not find it. We cannot find non-duality, and yet non-duality can find us. So I would say, well, in terms of what we're talking about, just forget about anything like that. In terms of, I mean, there are lots and lots of, I'll call them spiritual techniques, some of which I personally feel, have a kind of therapeutic benefit. I'd see them, if you like, I see therapy and spirituality as very much kind of merging in the middle, as it were. So there's quite a lot of things that I think people can do to make themselves feel more comfortable psychologically and so forth. And some of these could be called therapeutic, some of them could be called spiritual. So I'd see this thing of anything to do with observing myself, developing witness consciousness, awareness, becoming aware of itself. I would see it within that framework, but I wouldn't see it as effective. I mean, it's not the kind of, I mean, I do have a background as a therapist, and this would not be the right place for it. But, in a different circumstance, I might recommend to someone a certain practice or other. It definitely would not be that kind of practice. To me, let me put it this way, at the least, it will do no harm, but it'll probably be very boring. At the worst, it can bring about a sense of detachment, which I'm hesitating. I'm not quite sure how to put this. The worst, it will bring a kind of a sense of detachment, which in a way can seem quite attractive because it can provide a kind of barrier between myself and the pain of being alive, whatever that might be. So if I'm finding life a struggle, and let's face it, all of us find life a struggle at certain times, then developing a kind of detachment or an observer consciousness or a witness consciousness can make me feel better in inverted commas, because I'm cut off, if you like, from the pain. I'm no longer experiencing it so deeply. But I would say kind of therapeutically, that's probably always a bad thing. I mean, basically, I've, how can I put it this way? I've solved some of the problem of life's pain, but only at the expense of life itself, because now I'm not really alive. So I wouldn't, how can I put it, favor any kind of approach like that from either point of view. In terms of what we're talking about here, it's simply irrelevant. Forget it. That is not what non-duality is about. And from a therapeutic point of view, I think that there's probably a lot of other things that we could do that might help process the pain of life itself more satisfactorily. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. What kind of practice would you like to recommend? Instead, only silence, to be in silence, to generate silence?
This is a very dangerous place for me to go in an evening which is about non-duality. But since I've raised it myself and you've asked the question, I mean, I won't go into any detail, and obviously it will depend from individual to individual. But in a sense, you know, in terms of processing, let's say, emotional pain, emotional difficulty, and so forth, in terms of processing that as a general thing, I would say go for exactly the opposite of that kind of detached observer thing. In other words, take some time out to immerse ourselves in the feelings of what's going on. And I would emphasize the feelings, because the problem with life's problems, the problem with the pain that life throws up for us very often, is that we get caught up in the head about it. We get caught up in the story in the head about it. And the problem with that is that the mind's energy can just run that over and over and over again, virtually forever, without anything actually changing. And from a therapeutic point of view, there is a direct way to cut through that, which is to focus the attention much more on what's actually happening on a feeling level in the body. I mean, this is very well known. I mean, I'm not kind of breaking any original ground by saying this. And I'm going to leave it at that, because obviously this isn't an evening about therapy, but that would be my answer. Yeah. But certainly in terms of, you know, what we're talking about here in terms of, like, you know, the possibility of seeing through the person, it's got nothing to do with detachment. In a way, it's the exact opposite. Paradoxically, when I am not there, then I, as in the experience that is still going on, is probably going to be more connected than it's ever been before. I mean, that's why there's nothing in this communication that's, you know, a recipe necessarily a recipe for happiness or bliss or joy or you know, unbounded happiness or anything like that. I mean, there's nothing in this here. It's simply, you know, there's a fuller and a much more real connection. As I'm using these words, I know they're misleading, because if I'm saying connection, it must kind of imply between two things, me and the world. Well, just forget that. It's the way language works. It's not really what I'm saying. But, you know, it's likely that experience is going to become, the phrase that's just come to me is much more in your face and in my face. And I'm using that phrase because that covers good and bad. So joy may become deeper joy, sadness may become deeper sadness. Yeah, happiness may become richer happiness, anger may become richer anger. One of the ways that this is being described by many people is it's like the blinkers come off. You know, it's like living life full on without the blinkers. So it's like everything in a way floods in a stronger way.
And is this connection about seeing life without the wall of the mind?
Absolutely. Well, I would say, yeah, without the, yeah. Okay, yeah, we could, I won't pick hairs in that phrase, the walls of the mind. I mean, it would be a way of putting it. One of the classic images or metaphors for this, which goes back, in the history of time, pretending that there is such a thing, which goes back thousands of years, is that, life is lived, we have veils, there are veils in front of our eyes, and that those veils can disappear, can dissolve, can be lifted, if you like. I mean, it's there in the Gospels, which I don't quote very often, but occasionally I do, and I can't remember who it was. It's gone from my mind at the moment. But once I saw through a glass darkly, but now I saw clearly. I mean, seeing through a glass darkly is seeing through a veil, seeing through my spectacles with soot on them, as it were. So absolutely, this is about, if you like, the veils that we don't realize are there because they've always been there, disappearing. And it's like, wow, so that's what life is really like. And I want to say again, and it's a misleading phrase, that's what life is really like when I'm really connected to it. But by now it should be obvious why that in itself is a misleading phrase, because there's no I to be connected to life out there. The real connection is the recognition that they are the same thing. I and life are the same thing.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hello?
Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah.
I can hear you. I haven't seen you. Go
Hi,
ahead.
hi. I just want to make clear something, So there is never any I, whatever. It just doesn't exist, right? So the idea that it should fall away is just, you can say it's nonsense, right?
You can say that in a way, yeah. And yet, what we can talk about is, again, language is so difficult. I'm not going to get too tricky about this, but yet what we can talk about is an experience, which is experienced by no one. So yes, in a way, when we talk about the I falling away, it is a kind of nonsense, because what we're talking about is the end of something that never existed. So we're talking about, if you like, seeing through an illusion.
Yeah, but in a way, there's nobody who sees through it.
Absolutely, and not just in a way. We can take the in the way out there. That is the realization. The realization, if you like, is that there was never anyone who could see through themselves, or who could find reality, or who could recognize non-duality, if you like. Yeah, I mean, it's
this bit like two mirrors looking at each other, endlessly reflecting one another, and then there's just no source or end.
Yeah, I like that analogy, metaphor, picture, image. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, yeah.
But what
one image that people have used is, it's like the eye trying to see itself. I mean, the eye meaning, not the eye as in the person, but the eye as in the organ of vision. The eye trying to see itself. Yeah.
There's a neuroscientist, I can't remember his name, at MIT, who's talking about when we're not looking at the moon, it doesn't exist.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think that's come into my head as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that fits into this.
There's a part of me that feels like I just want to say I'd rather not go there, because when we start talking about quantum physics, I think almost everybody who talks about quantum physics makes a fool of themselves. I don't particularly want to join that band of people. You know, the classic thing that, you know, quantum physicists don't understand quantum physics. So, yeah. And I mean, yeah, having said I don't want to go down that road in a way, I can't just say, well, it's a theory. That's a theory. It's an interpretation. Trouble with quantum physics is because nobody understands it, there are only rival interpretations, and that's one of them. But it's an interpretation that appeals hugely to the spiritual community, so it gets a lot of traction. But no, I'm not the person to talk to about that. Probably.
Can I say something more? Or
yeah, please.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just you can say that you know, if nothing's going anywhere, then in a way there's nothing to happen. Like this is just the most perfect thing, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever's happening has to be perfection because it's all there is. Yeah. And that thing about if nothing's going anywhere, well, nothing is going anywhere, but it kind of points to how powerful the mind that apparently exists is in making up stories to tell itself that things are going somewhere, because, you know, that is at the heart of human culture. Of course, this must be going somewhere. It must be about something, and it's going somewhere. It's about pleasing God, or it's about ushering in the age of enlightenment, or it's about, you know, the, you know, evolving, you know, humans evolving into angels and or whatever. You know, it's so deeply embedded in, let's call it the mind. It's so deeply embedded in the mind that this must be about something. It must have a purpose. And we must be on a journey. You know, every spiritual path, every religion, not quite every philosophy, but quite a few philosophies as well, you know, tell us, you know, we're on a journey. There's a starting point, and there's a journey, and there's a destination. It's so addictive and gripping, that story. No. It's just this. It's not going anywhere. This is another way to start an argument in a pub or a bar, or it's so challenging.
Could I react to that, Richard?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
When you say it's not going anywhere, but it's going.
Apparently.
Apparently, but you know, and I think that's the magic of all. When I start, let's say, I can see in my life when the person here starts to take the steering wheel, things don't always go very well. But when there's just acceptance and when I allow things to come up as they come up, and then there's just reaction on that, things seems to smooth and just flow in a way I couldn't understand before.
Okay.
So in a way, things are happening and things are going somewhere, apparently. Okay.
Apparently.
And it's really nice to follow that. And there's a lot of things apparently happening that make me curious and want to try to investigate it or you know, and try to understand it, and even trying to understand it. Maybe it's doesn't have any use, but it's fun to do so.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, this doesn't, I mean, I'm very glad as well that maybe for some people it does, but for most of us, this doesn't destroy the interest in, you know, all the stories that are apparently happening. In fact, it can bring a lot more life to those stories. But nevertheless, there's the recognition that they are, you know, they are stories, they're amusements, if you like. You know, we don't have to kill each other over them anymore.
Well,
and fight to guard our corner when it comes to which God we want to embrace and so forth. You know, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I want to say, look, this is not going to be as dismissive as it might sound. You know, it's all nonsense, but it's delightful nonsense sometimes.
it's not-
Sometimes it's wonderful nonsense, but it's still all nonsense. Great fun, but yeah.
It's not like a flatliner or something. Things
I
are
don't know.
miraculously happening. Thoughts occur, ideas come up, people come into your life, things get done or not or whatever.
Yeah.
And I find it really like, let's say I can be tired because I had a busy day, but in a way it's also kind of soothing that, well, okay, things just are happening. And
Yeah.
I feel that when things don't go in a way that the little person here would have wanted it, it can be frustrating sometimes. But then sooner or later, it just disappears, and how do you say that? And then everything's fine again.
Yeah. If there was a sound for this, it would be the sound of relaxation. I've no idea what the sound of relaxation would be. That's what it would be. You know, there's well, I was going to say there's almost nothing that can be said definitively about non-duality. It's worse than that. There's nothing at all that can be said definitively about it. But if it cannot be described, but if it could be described, it would be relaxation. I know that doesn't sound very dramatic. It's certainly less dramatic than channeling archangels, which I'll be doing later in the evening for you, by the way. But it's wonderful. Relaxation. I like to quote, I think his name's Kenneth Dowman, who's an English Buddhist, who says, relaxation is the key to Buddhahood, right here and now. I mean, that's not exactly the same way that I would put it, but it's pretty good.
Feels
like anything, but if it was like something, it would be relaxation. It's a kind of, it's a letting go, but it's not me letting go. You know, I can't do that letting go, and yet that letting go can happen. Now, the danger with my saying that is that, you know, a pair of ears hears that and they go, okay, now I'm going to work at letting go. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But if it happens, when it happens, it's a letting go, not by me, but it's a letting go.
I keep thinking of Pink Floyd.
Go ahead.
No, just in terms of what's been discussed, and I'm just thinking of these. I don't know if anyone's heard High Hopes song with the endless river, I think, in the lyrics. You guys remember Pink Floyd? I mean, this is probably one of the most, I think it's just what we're talking about. It's making me think of Pink Floyd. And the lyrics and what's discussed. I mean, that's not, that's just me literally just saying what I'm thinking aloud.
That's fine. That's all I'm doing. Except you're not thinking your thoughts, and neither am I thinking mine, but I know what you mean.
Hello, Richard.
Hello?
There's nothing to let go of. So letting go is not accurate.
Absolutely.
Let's use other words.
Okay, what words would you like to use?
Seeing the truth.
Well, okay. You see, yeah, words.
Insight. Insight.
You might, you know, you might not be comfortable with letting go. I'm not comfortable with truth, but it doesn't matter. No.
See, no, in other words, it's not a semantical game. In other words, see the truth that letting go is false. There is no letting go because nothing to let go of.
There's
right?
no one to let go either.
And there's no one to let go of either, right?
Otherwise.
So therefore, throw out those words. Don't ever use those words because they give people the wrong idea.
Okay.
There's something to do. There's a doer who's going to let go of something. There's nothing there.
Okay, so
this is what the me thinks, though. The me thinks I'm going to do something to tame the me, to manage the me, to get rid of certain aspects of the me, to get rid of the me. You know, this is what the me thinks. The me thinks already it's going to do something. It's going to surrender. It's going to sacrifice. It's going to let go. right? That's a self-deception, right? The me can do nothing. Whatever the me does is more of the me. That's all. Just
Okay,
see the
so-
fact, right? Not the theory, the idea, the fact that whatever the me does is still the me.
No, absolutely, I agree with that. But what I, where we'll part company is that
Now,
this-
is there an action
No,
that is not the me?
Let me say this. I agree with that last bit. We're grokking there, but what you were saying earlier, it's for me, what I'm hearing is that there's someone there who thinks that it matters how we put this and what we say. And there is
Yes, there is something there,
this.
but it's not the me.
Okay, so we disagree about that.
Yeah.
To me, I don't.
In other words, who's
Really
speaking now? Ask yourself, who's speaking now? Who's listening now? Who is that? Is it Richard? Or is there something else? Or nothing? And nothing, the nothing might be the something else, right? That's acting, listening, using words, using knowledge for language. In other words, what's behind the words?
No, you've lost me. I'm sorry, you've lost me. I'm sorry.
Okay, what happens? Okay, let's put it another way.
Say this. I cannot make sense of what you're saying. You've just
Yeah, let me put it another way. So
Well,
when you're set free, when the brain body is set free from the illusion that there's a me, what happens? Anybody?
If you want to say something, say it.
No, I'm asking what happens. In other words, look, what happens when your brain sees the fact that there is no me? What happens? Do it now. In other words, find out directly for yourself right now.
I have to say again that, I can hear the words, but it's not making sense to me. We're on a completely different page, you and I, Jacob. There's, we're just not rocking or meeting. I can't make sense of what you're saying.
Is there an action that is not of the me? Is there a way of living, a way of behaving that has nothing whatsoever to do with the me? The me is gone, right? It has dissolved. It was never there. I recognize that. Therefore, it has no influence on me anymore. Then what takes place? That's the question.
Again, we're just missing each other. If there's anybody listening to this who'd like to come in and comment on this, please do so. But I have no comment to make. It's just, you're just not making sense.
Yeah, this is for everyone. This is not just for you.
I realize
We're all
that.
working at it together.
That's why I'm saying that. I'm saying if somebody else would like to come in and comment on this, please do. Otherwise, I think we should move on because I'm not making any sense of this. It's too abstract for me. Anyone? Okay, let's move on to someone else then.
Yeah, Richard, just to let you know, it's Lulu next, then Rakesh.
Okay. Lulu?
Hello, Richard.
Hi, hello.
Thank you for your time. My question is, you talked about no one being there. If there is no one there to see, then who's seeing?
No one is seeing. No one is seeing. That's the kind of point, and it's the kind of shocking revelation that there's always been, let's say, this assumption, this experience, that there is someone here who is seeing, and it kind of seems obvious that there needs to be. How can seeing take place without someone there to be doing the seeing? And that's the shock, is the realization that that's not the case. Seeing happens without the need for a person to be seeing.
No, but no one is seen.
Hang on, we're back. I think it's Lulu.
No one is seen. You get it? No one is not nothing. In other words, nothingness is not nothing. It's just nothing that thought can imagine, right? And nothingness is an intelligence, is an energy. It's the mind of the universe, right? In other words, it's not nothing. It's just nothing in the sense that thought can't touch it, right? Thought being finite. But as you said, no one is listening. No one is acting. the nothingness, the stillness, the silence is moving, acting, responding, creating every moment, every second. It's engaged in everything that's happening in the world, right? It's spreading out. The light is spreading out across the planet. It's not living on top of a mountain, isolated somewhere in the woods.
And who are you
It's
to notice
engaged.
that?
Okay,
What?
Jacob, can we get back to Lulu? Sorry, Lulu.
Now, I was asking Jacob, who is that is noticing all that movement, the way he's explaining it?
In other words, who's speaking?
Yeah, who are you to speak in that respect?
Silence is speaking. No one, as he said, no one is speaking.
And how do you know the silence is speaking?
It's the not knowing that brings the knowing.
Who is recognizing what
When
you're
there's no me, the other is. So first
you're not
start with the fact, here's the starting place. Start with the fact that you made a me, thought made a me, and you believe in it. You worship it. It's your security
Who are
blanket.
you to believe in it? Who are you to notice it? Who is noticing all that, what you are saying?
When you look in a mirror, you see yourself. The me sees
Who
itself.
created the mirror? Who invented the mirror?
Thought did. That's obvious. Thought
Nothing
invented the
is
mirror, and there was a
obvious.
reason why.
You're not making sense. It's not obvious. To me, it's not obvious.
You're not
and
going
I'm
to get
trying to
this
make sense of
intellectually.
what
If you're trying to
saying.
get this through intellectually, you're not going to get it. You have to see it. You have to have an insight. Now, I'm using words. Use my words as pointers to see yourself. Now, see your
Okay.
reactions, right? See you say, I don't get it. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense. See that. That is the me acting, saying, I agree, I don't agree.
I like to know who is there that sees it. And that's
I'm
my
saying
question
that's
from
Okay,
Richard.
It's becoming thought, which is the me. The me is a bundle of thoughts, is becoming aware of itself. Like looking in a
How
mirror.
do you know your thoughts?
By
How do
looking
you
in the
know your
mirror.
thoughts?
In the mirror of relationships. Like right now, I'm talking.
No, I
You're
cannot look
having
at the mirror
various-
because I did not
No, look at
create
what's
the mirror.
happening. I'm speaking, you're having reactions. Those reactions are the movement of the me. So see the me now. You get
Okay.
it? Use me as a mirror to
intervene.
see yourself.
Jacob, listen, I really want to intervene. You know, I'm not making sense of this still. I'm sorry that I'm not, but I'm not. I want to stop this. You know,
I'm not either.
I want to hear what Lulu has to say. We were having a conversation. You've intervened, and I can't make sense of your intervention. I want to get back to Lulu.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm having a hard time what he brought forward, and I just wanted to know who's there. Is there an individual? Is there, as you said, there is no one, but how do I know there is no one? How can I, how does that connect? I can make that connection. Could you clarify it for me?
You shall know them by their fruit.
Jacob,
By their
Jacob, please,
Jacob.
Jacob, I'm not asking you. Could you
No.
please?
Jacob, I'm going to ask Louis if he can exclude you if you go on interrupting like this. My only other suggestion to you is I think you should hold your own meetings because you've obviously got a lot to say, but it's not relevant to what's going on here. Okay? Now give Lulu a chance. Yeah. Say that again, Lulu.
I just wanted to be clear when you said that there is no one here. How would I know, and how do I connect to that understanding or experience or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. So all I can say to that is that this can be known when there's a direct arising of that or a direct realization of that, and that in a way you, as in Lulu the apparent individual, Lulu the personality, the person, can never know that, but what can happen is that Lulu can disappear, and then what's left, if you like, is the knowing, the realization, the apprehension that it is all one. It is all oneness, that there isn't that separation between Lulu, the individual, and everything else. There is only unity, if you like. So, you know, there's an assertion from here, if you like, and in a way, what the mind does with this assertion is irrelevant. It can accept it, it can reject it. In a way, it doesn't matter. There's an assertion from here that our cordless seeing can simply arise. It can simply arise.
Okay.
And until it's seen, it can only be thought about, cognized, approached as ideas, if you like, and none of that will get anywhere close to it. You could say, well, it's all we have, you know, as long as the kind of mind's engaged with this and it's not seen, then in a way, that's all we have. All we have is ideas and intellectualizations and that kind of thing. And that can just all be gone in a moment. It can just be gone in a moment, and there can just be that direct, oh my goodness. You know, there really is no one.
So unless it's experienced that there is no one, it cannot be, in reality, you cannot talk about it till it's been seen.
We can talk about it, but it has no value in a way. But
Right.
it can be entertaining. I mean, some of us love doing it.
Okay.
And this, going back to this, you know, the famous phrase, you know, the head in the tiger's mouth, that really having no idea what this is, nevertheless, I can be dragged towards it or attracted magnetically towards it. And we could ask the question, well, why? Why me? Why now? Whatever. Like any why question that the mind asks, we can only answer that with a story.
Right.
You could make up some story about, you know, why for 40 years did I have no interest in this? And then suddenly there's this kind of absolute fascination, even though there's no understanding. We can ask that question. But if we answer it, we can only answer it by making up a story. Oh, perhaps it was my karma, or perhaps an angel came to me in the night, or perhaps endlessly. But all of these stories that the mind makes up, you know, they are just stories. They can, you know, we're talking about something which actually can never be known. And I've already mentioned the word relaxation, that, you know, if there was a key to this, which there isn't, but if there was a key to this, it might be relaxation. It's partly because when this is seen, what can happen is that there can be this realization that all of these why questions that the mind's been asking itself, they can never be answered. They can never be answered, these questions. And when that's really got, then the mind can kind of let go of them, can relax about them. I mean, as long as the mind thinks, you know, if I work hard enough, I can get to ultimate truth, whatever that means. I can understand ultimate reality, whatever that means. I can know the mind of God, whatever that means. As long as the mind believes that, it's going to be working. When it's really seen that there are no answers, then the mind may just relax, collapse, or relax, or both.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Rikesh.
How are you? Thanks for doing this. Oh, good. Glad to hear it. I don't know how I'm going to formulate this question, but I'll just speak and see if a question comes out of it. So correct me at any point if you feel to. So there's nothing we can do to cultivate this realization for no one. It happens, or it doesn't happen, and yet I'm obviously still seeking, and I'm kind of just accepted that that's just something I'm doing, and there's this sense that every time I have glimpses, that it's kind of like a seesaw. You know, there's like glimpses, and then there's extreme kind of neuroses and suffering, and glimpses, and it's just like this, you know, it seems to be seesawing more and more. So I guess I'm kind of interested in this, in the neuroses, that the good chunk of neuroses that fall away or seem to fall away, and if there's any, and the clarity that can be brought about in relating to people from those neuroses falling away, and if they can be, I don't know, in some way applied or you know, replicated, or is that futile? Is that as futile as?
Can you spell that out a bit more? In what way?
Okay, so if I give you an example, maybe that might help. So let's say egoic defensiveness diminishes significantly after this realization.
But it may do, because there are no rules. But it may well do, yeah.
It may well do. Okay, so it's possible that it may well not. Then
it's possible.
It's possible.
There's no absolutes, but keep on the track you were going down anyway.
Well, I guess, like, you know, I guess if there's a good chunk of neuroses that fall away, then there's a seeing through a lot of charades of egoic behavior, I guess.
Yeah.
And you know, is there any way that, if there's nothing I can do to bring about the realization, can I at least apply the clarity that's been seen beyond it in relationships to, like, my day to day? Is there some way that can be useful, I guess?
I'm not absolutely sure I've understood where you're going with this, but if I have, and I may not have done, then I'm going to say no, unfortunately, because there's no one who can bring about this seeing, unless this seeing, as it were, arises of its own accord. Then, you know, the whatever changes or realizations in terms of neurosis and other things that come about, you know, they can't happen, if you like, and I know this may sound very frustrating, they can't happen unless they happen.
So they're just sorry.
I mean, I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding where you're going with this, but in terms of sort of talking about neuroses, seeing through neuroses from any other level and so forth, then my mind again starts going more down the path of, you know, therapy and, you know, growth, you know, self-understanding in those kind of ways, which, you know, obviously, you know, the separated person, you know, can apparently do a lot about.
So that, and as you said earlier, therapy has nothing to do with this message.
No. And the kind of, I mean, there may or may not be a kind of explosion and disappearance of some, or at least a little bit of neurotic energy in what we're talking about here. But if it happens spontaneously, and it can't have anything to do with me or who I thought I was or what I thought I was doing. Whereas, you know, as a person, as an individual, I can go into therapy or group work or something like that. I can work on my neuroses in those ways. It doesn't really have any more or any less to do with what we're talking about here than, say, you know, stroking a cat or drinking. It's all just, in a way, it's all just stuff happening. Yeah,
I guess over here, where I'm still in the dream, it, you know, like the quote that you say about having your head in the tiger's mouth. There's this sense that now that it's in the tiger's mouth, it's so, life's just so much more torturous, knowing, you know, having glimpses and knowing what, how, you know, what could, and that it's not seen yet over here. I guess I want to die in that sense. You know what I mean? I want to do it.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely know what you mean, and you know, I mean, I can certainly remember, you know, my version of that. Yeah, absolutely, and the frustration. Yeah,
very, very. It seems to be getting more intense instead of less intense.
Yeah, so the tiger's grip is, those teeth are going in hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just that hope that it will eventually bite your head off.
I just want it to bite, Richard. Just do it.
Very much empathize with that. Yeah, I remember feeling like that. Yeah, and for me, and for, I think for, you know, it's often reported there's a kind of despair that can arise. And despair, you know, usually culturally people hear that word despair and think of it as a very negative thing, you know, but, you know, to me, it's just something, actually, there could be something quite, I'm not quite sure what word to use, you know, quite kind of, well, again, relaxing about despair, because usually what we have is hope, and hope can be very stressful. Because as long as there's hope, it's like, well, there's something you can be doing. And actually, as long as you're doing something, there's something you could be doing more than that. If only you're a bit more dedicated and sincere. And if you're meditating for 3 hours a day, well, you could be meditating for 4, couldn't you? You know, and if you really were that dedicated and that sincere, you would be meditating for 4 or maybe 5. But that's kind of where hope takes us. And with despair, I mean, if it's genuine despair, I mean, I'm not talking about some kind of, you know, mimsy passing feeling, but if it's genuine despair, it's the seeing that, you know, there is nothing that this can do, and there can be, I'm sorry to keep coming back to this word, there can be relaxation in that.
Yeah.
There's a British, quite old British comedy film with John Cleese in it that I kind of quote at this point, if this comes up in a meeting. I think it was a film called Clockwise, I think, and John Cleese is frantically rushing around trying to do whatever he can do to get the girl. The girl is Jamie Lee Curtis, so she's definitely worth getting. And at one point, as he's sort of hopelessly rushing along, he sort of says, it's not the despair, I can stand the despair, it's the hope I can't stand. And I think, yeah, absolutely. You know, as long as there's hope, there's tension. Tension's the opposite of relaxation. If despair is genuine, then there's a light. There's really the seeing, there really is nothing I can do.
It's really hopeless.
Just be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No, you can't just be.
Oh dear.
You can't
sorry.
just be. When you say just be,
hang on, you've had to go. Don't keep interrupting Miss Jacob.
You're activating the me when you say just be. The me says, okay, I'm going to be.
Really
you're just feeding the me.
On other people. It's Rikesh's turn.
I'm almost done, but I was just going to say, Richard, I heard that once Tony wished for you to die soon, and if you feel to wish that upon me, by all means.
I absolutely wish it for you too. I hope that you die soon as
well. Thank you.
I'm passing on Tony's blessing. I'm just an intermediary, passing on Tony's blessing through me to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Take care and thanks for your time.
Yeah.
So, Richard, I'm going to go through some questions and maybe some comments in chat.
Yeah.
And actually, so can you say something? I think we need to move the focus back to you. It's on Rakesh.
Is there anything I do if I come
there
on
we
camera
go.
with you?
Okay. So I'll say who it's from as well. So if the person wants to unmute themselves, but I think some people just want to ask through chat.
Okay.
So from Carlos, comment on the question: as thoughts arise, particularly compulsive thoughts, they bring about identification. How do you suggest to deal with them as OCD?
Right. Okay. I wouldn't go there. You know, that's therapy, if you like. There's people out there, there's good advice. I mean, the mention of OCD, yeah, absolutely, you know, that's a thing to look into. But in a way, what we're talking about here, it's not, I mean, it's not about that. You see, in a way, that's, how can I put this? That's the stuff that's arising. And what we're talking about here is maybe seeing through that, the possibility of seeing through that, you know, to, if you like, that which it's arising in. I mean, thoughts, whether they're troubling thoughts, addictive thoughts, OCD thoughts, or whatever, they are, if you like, the matter that's arising. What we're talking about here is the possibility of seeing that which they're arising in, which is oneness. I mean, in saying that, it's sounding like that I'm suggesting that those thoughts aren't part of oneness, but that's just the way language works. I'm not actually saying that, it's just that, you know, language divides everything up.
Okay, as question.
But I wouldn't go there in a. I mean, it's a you know, it's an important question. It's a question which has relevance to, you know, many people, but in a way, you know, it's a question about. I'd use the word therapy very loosely.
Okay. This is from, I think,
Can
Tia.
I just add one more thing? In a way, you know, that's about, you know, that's about the quality of my experience of life, or my experience of reality. And in a way, what I'm trying to point to here is something that goes beyond, you know, the individual experience, you know, the quality of my experience. Oh, this experience is good, that experience is bad, this thought is a nice thought, this thought is a disturbing thought or a compulsive thought. I'm trying to point to something beyond all of that. It's not that that isn't important and valid, of course it is. It's both of those things, but I'm trying to point to what, if you like, is beyond that.
Okay. I can't remember if you spoke with them earlier. There was a question from, I think it's Tia and Harry. Okay. But I can't remember if they did it in person, or it just says a question about free will and choice, but that's it. So, I mean, if they want to jump in, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think that question have been addressed in a way, and what I would like to explore is that when you say that thoughts, ideas, feelings, they are just coming up and there's no person to experience them.
Yeah.
I've lost the question that I was wanting to ask about it. So no. The thing is that you just cannot put into words what it really is, because words are also some kind of way of understanding it or giving it meaning. So I can see all these comments that Jacob has posted, and I can see the reactions of everybody, and there are no words to explain or describe what's really going on. It's just, sometimes you just can sit back and relax and don't talk about it, but just experience whatever is going through your mind or body or whatever there is.
Yeah. Well, as
I
far
think-
as I know, no one talks about this 24/7. I mean,
No.
that would be hell. You're absolutely right. You know, some people use the word pointing and giving pointers. I don't tend to use those phrases, but you could say that all words can do is kind of point towards this or hint at it or direct attention to it. Of course, they can't do any more than that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, unless there's anything else you want to ask, I've got another question from chat. It's from Will, and yeah, Will, unmute yourself if you want, but it's just a short question. Does memory create the concept of self?
Does memory create the concept of self? No. Well, hang on. Does memory create the concept of self? No, still no. But what I was going to say was that the sense of self is, and if you like, it's we could probably best describe it as an actual energy. You know, it's a kind of
like,
contracted
were
energy.
you Richard? Were you Richard earlier?
Say that again, Will.
Were you Richard earlier? Or is this the first time you're Richard?
Well, in terms of a character, you could say, you know, yeah, Richard was Richard earlier. In terms of what we're talking about here, there is no earlier. It's just this. But in this, apparent memories arise.
Just go with the flow.
Does that mean? Well,
That's a simple, but yeah.
there's no one who can go with the flow or resist the flow. Going with the flow happens. Resisting the flow happens. Sometimes one happens, sometimes the other. There's no one in there choosing to do either of those. It's a lovely idea, going with the flow. I love it.
Yeah, I wish I could do it. I'm too neurotic for that. Anyway, that's my bit.
Okay.
Another quick one. I don't know if this is from Michael. I don't know if Michael wants to jump in. It's just a very short, well, a few comments, but specifically, life itself is taking actions, but that's the entire context. So I don't know if that brings up anything. Or...
No, that's as good a description as any. Life is just happening. This is just happening. We think that we may be doing some of life. Actually, life is just happening.
Okay. Here's one from Gigi. What is the origin of non-duality? Is it a contemporary idea or an ancient one?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in terms of, you know, in the history of time, pretending that there is such a thing, I think that probably the clearest thing to say about this is the core. This is at the heart of all what develops into spiritual paths, religions, etc. You know, at the heart, however hidden, and often it is very, very, very hidden indeed, is this apprehension. You know, this is the ultimate apprehension. I mean, people sometimes say to me, you know, because I call religion stories and I call spiritual path stories, and so the people say, well, isn't non-duality a story as well? To which the answer clearly is, well, yes, of course it is. I mean, non-duality is also a story. Nothing that's put into words is not a story. So yeah, this is a story as well that we're sharing here. But my contention is that non-duality is, if you like, the mother of all stories. It's the base story because it's the story that has the fewest unnecessary ornamentations added onto it. So if you think of a story like, for example, Roman Catholicism, I picked that because it's pretty complex. You know, Roman Catholicism has got huge huge curlicues and towers and turrets added to it, huge complications and ornamentations added to it. In many ways, that's what makes it so attractive to so many minds, right? So at the heart of that is probably, I'm going to add the word probably as a guarantee, at the heart of that is maybe the same understanding. I've shifted from probably to maybe the same understanding. If you go to the mystics in the Roman Catholic tradition, you will almost certainly recognize very, very, very clear connection with what's being said here. You might also notice that historically, in the story of time, the Roman Catholic Church had a habit of executing its mystics because it didn't really want to hear this. But at the heart of religions, is almost always, the non-dual apprehension. But then the mind comes in and creates complications and complications and complications. I've kind of forgotten what the comment or question was there that I was saying that about, but maybe that gets to it.
Yeah, the origin of non-duality the origin of non-duality is a contemporary or ancient idea. It's as ancient, pretending that there's time, it's as ancient as ideas could possibly be. Okay, actually a couple more from Michael, one a comment and a question. Comment is silence includes this as well. Ocean is a wave of sorrow as well. There is no separation. And the question is this self separate from silence? No. Well, there is no self. There is no self. And I'll throw in here, I'm not sure if it's relevant to that comment or not, but it's, it sometimes comes up and it hasn't come up yet this evening. So this is the point for it, maybe that silence and noise are the same thing anyway. This is also part of the shock of what's seen. And it also connects with what I was just talking about, how, the kind of stories of what this is about, the religious stories, the spiritual stories, tend to collapse when this is seen, when it's seen that silence and noise are the same thing, and movement and stillness are the same thing. So if I'm a spiritual seeker, I'll just kind of give one example to see if this makes it clear. If I'm a spiritual seeker, I may well, travel, I don't know, into the heart of the Himalayas and sit in a monastery, because I feel as a person that there is more silence in that monastery than in the centre of London, right? When this is seen, that just becomes nonsense. There's just as much silence in the centre of London, in Piccadilly Circus, if you like, as there is in the most sacred Buddhist monastery. It's the same silence. It's just that when the person's there, that can't be seen. And the same stillness. Stillness and movement are the same thing. Buses whizzing around Piccadilly Circus in London, there is just as much stillness in Piccadilly Circus in London as there is in the most ancient Japanese monastery. There's no difference, but to the person who's seeking, there seems to be a difference. So the person who's seeking may buy the aeroplane ticket to Kyoto and then trek into the mountains to sit in this monastery. I was once told very reverentially, I don't even know if it's true, very reverentially, that there is a temple in Japan where there has been continuous chanting for 800 years. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, as a seeker, I might have responded to that with, oh God, the holiness of that place. Oh, I'd love to experience that deep, deep peace, spirituality and silence. There's just as much deep peace, spirituality and silence in Piccadilly Circus. Silence and sound, stillness and movement, they're the same thing. And I'm not kind of, I don't know, trying to construct some kind of, I don't know, spiritual story here. I'm talking about, I'm going to use the word experience because it's the only word I can use, although it's a little bit misleading. I'm talking about, an actual apprehended experience when this is apprehended, when this is seen. It becomes
you know, it's almost like, you know, the whole idea of spiritual seeking, for example, becomes absurd, because we might just as well say that everything is spiritual seeking and nothing is spiritual seeking. Making a cup of tea is just as much spiritual seeking as meditating.
Okay, one last one from chat. This is from Michael again. So what about the danger of becoming a spiritual zombie by repeating and being strongly identified with non-duality pointers?
Oh, well, that's just something that the mind might do. I mean, you know, everything has dangers. We wake up in the morning, there are dangers. The mind might get us into trouble. That's just one way in which the mind might get us into trouble. Yeah, sure, that might happen. You know, so what? Or the mind might wake up one morning and decide, oh, I think I'll get confirmed as a Catholic after all. Well, yeah, okay, that's just part of the stuff that happens. It's what the mind does. Yep, might happen, might not.
Okay, so as I say, I'm going to stop recording here. So we're about at the 90 minute mark.